Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I want to first mention that this is a current situation and it could happen again in the future, so I'm not 100% at ease with it yet. Well, I'm young, I'm 19 and male, and despite my age, people usually think that I'm around 15 or 16. A lot of times, I go to church at night, and to get there, I have to pass through a stretch where there aren't many people or traffic. It was in this place that at least twice, a man who I don't know approached me, offering me a ride on the motorcycle that he always rides. I'm saying every time and always, but it's only happened twice. But having it happen once and then a second time made me more worried. It makes me feel like I'm being followed or that he knows exactly where and when I pass by alone. The first time I saw him, I was walking down the street and he came by on his motorcycle. I thought he was asking for directions, so I tried to listen to see what it was, but as I got closer, I realized that he was only looking down at me and not at my face. So I made up an excuse and I kept walking. I was lucky because he didn't follow me or insist. The second time that I was heading to church, he was already on that same street. This happened weeks or months after the first encounter. Again, he tried to get my attention, but I was walking on the other side of the street and I pretended to not notice him. I was really worried and scared at that point because I saw that it was happening again, so I kept walking straight. I could already see the church, but he came by on his motorcycle, stopped right by the edge of the road, got off, and came up to me offering a ride. And by chance, there weren't any cars passing by, so I crossed the road. You have to cross a road that connects cities to get to my church, and many cars pass through it. That day, there was a celebration with a lot of people, and I stayed the rest of the night talking with friends from there, out of fear that this man would enter or do something. Fortunately, I got a ride back in a car, and I wasn't alone. My biggest fear is that this could happen a third time, since now, he knows where I'm going to. Some time ago, I told my husband that I was heading to the store. I just needed to grab some last-minute supplies for the dinner that we were hosting that night. Our closest friends, Mike and Grace, were moving across the country for a new job opportunity. It was a bittersweet farewell, and we wanted to send them off with a proper meal and an evening filled with laughter and memories. We had been through so much together, from celebrating their kids' birthdays to sharing countless holiday dinners. Their move was a big change for us, but we understood that the opportunity was too good for them to pass up. So I wanted everything to be perfect for their send-off. I drove to the local shopping center. It was a small place not far from our house. It was a weekday afternoon, so I wasn't surprised to find the parking lot sparsely populated. There were just a few cars dotted with wide expanse of asphalt, leaving plenty of space to park wherever you wanted to. Inside, the store was calm and quiet. There weren't many people shopping, which was nice because it made it easy to move through the aisles and focus on my list. I grabbed a cart, I started picking up items that we needed, some fresh vegetables, a nice cut of meat, and a couple bottles of wine. As I moved from aisle to aisle, I felt a subtle sensation that I was not alone. I then noticed a man who seemed to appear in every section that I visited. He was average looking, wearing a plain jacket and jeans, nothing remarkable or nothing that made him suspicious or creepy. and at first, I really thought that it was just a coincidence. I mean, we were shopping after all. But as I moved to the dairy section, there he was again, seemingly focused on the same area. I tried to brush off the feeling, telling myself that it was just paranoia or the eeriness of the near empty store. But when it happened again in the frozen food section, I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. I decided to test my suspicion by taking a detour to a part of the store that I didn't need anything from. The aisle with cleaning supplies. And sure enough, moments later, he appeared there, pretending to browse products on the shelves. It was just weird. He didn't look at me, he didn't say anything to me, but he was just there wherever I went to. My heart started to race, the realization setting in that this wasn't mere chance. I kept my head down though, pretending to look at my list, trying not to let him see that I was aware of his presence. I then quickly pushed my cart towards the checkout area, hoping that the cashier would deter him. As I unloaded my items onto the conveyor belt, I glanced back and saw him standing a few aisles away, partially hidden behind a display stand. And this time, his eyes were fixed on me. I could barely concentrate as the cashier rang up my items. My thoughts were scattered. There was a mix of fear and disbelief, and once my groceries were bagged, I moved quickly towards the exit. I wanted to go home, but something inside me told me not to exit the store alone. I did not feel safe knowing that this guy was following me around. What if he was outside waiting for me to get into my car and then jump out? Or what if he followed me home? The store didn't have a security guard, and the only worker that I could see was the young and petite female cashier. So I decided to do the only thing that I could think of, to contact my husband. My hands were trembling as I reached for my phone. I texted my husband, telling him about the strange man who seemed to be following me in the store. I asked him to come over, needing his presence. I waited near the store entrance, trying to act casually, but my heart was pounding whenever I saw a shadow or hear footsteps approaching. 10 minutes passed, though it did feel much longer. I saw my husband parking, and then he walked towards me. Relief just washed over me. He approached with a calm demeanor, but his eyes showed that he understood the situation. And funny enough, at the exact moment, I saw the man in the corner. Looked like he just popped out of nowhere. And as soon as the man who had been following me noticed, he turned around and left, quickly disappearing out into the trees behind the store. I stayed close to my husband as we walked back to the car. I was looking around to make sure that the man was truly gone. I then got in my car and I drove, and my husband drove his, following me out of the store. The whole experience left me shaking inside. I did call the non-emergency hotline to report the incident, so if something happens to someone else, at least they already have an idea that there's a suspicious man going around that area. We never did see that man again, and I am grateful for that. But the sense of security that I once felt while shopping alone was altered. It was a day that reinforced the importance of staying alert and trusting your instincts. And you bet that after that incident, I never went to that store without my husband. Hello, I'm a 20-year-old female, and I have a stalker who is 20 to 21 and male. This started about 2 to 3 months ago. I work in an art store and I do a little of everything, helping customers, cleaning, stocking shelves, and many more. One day, this guy comes in asking for help as he never really took up art before. And lucky me, I was chosen to help that guy. We talked for a bit and I asked what he wants to learn, what medium he wants to use and such. He said that he's into sketching at the moment, but he wants to expand his horizon. I say cool, and I give him a few directions. And somehow, it comes up that I'm also an artist. And he then gets really interested. He asked me if I can help him with art, which caught me off guard because, huh? I said that I'm not a professional and I'm not interested in teaching. But he took that well, and off he went. The next week he returns again and specifically asked for me. He said that he brought his sketchbook this time, which I found very odd since I don't remember agreeing to help him. He shows me some of his sketches, and I noticed that he only draws K-pop singers, and I realized that one of them is a member of BTS. I don't really listen to them, but I just pointed it out. He then starts raving about BTS and K-pop and the like, which is like, okay? Apparently, I hit a sweet spot for him because nobody likes K-pop and I know of it. Anyway, he starts coming in now every few days and I'm really disturbed by him. I also found out that he learned my work schedule, my birthday, my name, how old I am, and many more. I only found this out because of a few encounters with a said customer. Number 1. One day, I clock into work and I see him waiting in the stairs for me. He then acts all surprised like, "Whoa, I didn't know you were coming in so early." And I could tell that he's lying because he was sweating really badly and couldn't look at my face, and it creeped me out so much. Number 2. On my birthday, he came up to me at the exact time that I'm supposed to start my shift, and he gave me a gift and a note. He drew a member of a band that I like and gave me a birthday card, and told me that he wanted to bring me something a day before my birthday because he knew that I wouldn't come in the day of. Mind you, I never told him my birthday. He probably overheard me talking about it to my coworkers, but it creeped me out so much. I had insane amounts of anxiety and I had to muster up the courage to act like I wasn't completely off-put by this. After he walked away, I looked at the note that he wrote me, which said, "Happy 20th birthday. Keep making people happy and being so kind. P.S. I'm not a paper thief, so you can have this back." Huh? Paper thief? And then I realized that the paper the note was written on was a piece of garbage that I threw away months ago. He picked it up from the trash to return to me. That made my blood run cold. Number 3. He came in and asked for help like usual when he brought up buying something for kids. And because I wanted to know if maybe there's a wife or something involved, I asked, "Oh, how old are your kids?" Obviously, I also need to know to give him age-appropriate supplies. He then started freaking out and saying that those weren't his kids and that he's not married. And then started asking me if I'm married. I said that I'm not married, but I am in a committed relationship and have been for 5 years now. Which was a lie, but he got very disappointed. He then walked off, and I thought maybe that was it. He didn't come in for 2 weeks and I was overjoyed up until today. He came up to me during work while I was busy and asked for help, and then asked where I was for 2 weeks, which really confused me, but also disturbed me deeply. I tried my best to not interact with him, and I told my coworker to take over for a while I go hide in the back. She agrees and keeps him busy, and then he just ends up leaving. After he left, she called me over and said that I can come out, and I asked, "Did he ask anything about me?" And she looked at me with a concerned look and said, "Yeah, he did. He asked why you're so busy suddenly, and when you'll come out and if you work tomorrow. I am riddled with anxiety, and it's making me really anxious at work because I'm afraid to see him. Thankfully, he hasn't done anything physical to me, but it's putting a lot of mental strain on me, and I don't want to quit because I love my job and my co-workers. Also, very important to mention, after the birthday incident, the moment that he left, I went up to management and told them everything about him, and that it creeps me out and I feel really unsafe. My manager said, "Well, it's totally legitimate to go after a girl you like. That's what men would do back in the day. You should feel flattered." And the co-owner said, "It's all because women wear little clothes nowadays. It makes the men act up." And just to note, I have to conform to dress code, and I haven't even showed as much as a shoulder. I told my parents and friends, and they are all on my side and think that he's a complete weirdo. Honestly, I don't know what to do about it. It's really creepy, and I'm scared to encounter him again. I, a 30-year-old female, went to a concert last night with a group of friends. Towards the end of the concert, I noticed the man appearing near me every time that I went to a different area of the venue. I may have said a couple words in passing, but we didn't exchange names or anything. After the concert, I was talking to my friends and one of their family members when I noticed this man was there next to us again. When we left the venue to walk my friend's mom to her car, I told my friends about the strange man and that I thought that he was following me inside the venue. I said this pretty loudly, and I decided to turn around to see if anyone heard. He was right there, about 3 paces behind us. I immediately told my friends that he was there, and my BFF was like, "Is it you?" and essentially told him to get lost. I'm still feeling really weird about the whole encounter. What would have happened if I had been alone? Edit. I am not asking for advice. I plan to bring a taser next time that I go out, and I will look into purchasing a small firearm in 2025. Women shouldn't have to protect ourselves from creeps. How about people just stop being creeps? One of my friends just reminded me of this story, so I figured that I would post it here. This happened towards the beginning of our freshman year in college. My best friend, another freshman girl my age, and I befriended this other freshman guy, and we quickly became a tight-knit group. We would hang out with each other constantly, to the point that some assumed that we were siblings or roommates. At the beginning of our first semester, one of us were really into the whole party scene, so we spent most of our time wandering around campus into the late hours of the night. I'm talking 4 to 5 a.m. some nights. We had lots of fun adventures and made all sorts of fun memories doing this. But we had our fair share of weird encounters, both with other people and some that we cannot explain to this day. This story happened not on the weekend, but I believe on a weekday close to midterms. I remember us all studying in one of the academic buildings together late at night, and then one of us mentioned wanting to take a long walk around campus just to help relieve the stress. It was around 2 or 3 a.m. at that time, and we decided to hike out to one of the scenic overlooks on our campus. Our campus was pretty rural, and it was surrounded by woods, so there was a path through the woods that you could take or you could just walk on the main road. We decided to follow the road. It was really dark, and this particular area of the campus had very few streetlights. We were using our phone flashlights to see where we were going. It was probably not the best idea to be roaming around campus so late at night, but we were stupid freshmen and had done it plenty of times before. Our campus felt safer due to it being so rural. We made it to the overlook, and we were the only ones out there due to how late it was. No cars were parked or anything. The way it's set up is that the road goes into this circle around the overlook. We were sitting on a bench with our backs to the main road, just talking about random things, when all of a sudden, we felt headlights on our backs, so we all turned to see who it was. It wasn't entirely unusual for a car to be out there late at night. Our campus police do regular patrols of the area, or students will go there to hook up or use drugs. The car was an older GMC Yukon-style SUV and was a dark forest green color. I vividly remember the color because you typically don't see many cars that color, you know? We all watched as the car came in from the road, drove around the little circle, and then went back up the road. We just went back to our conversation, but 2 to 3 minutes later, we could see the headlights behind us again. We again turned to look and realized that it was the same green car as before, coming back a second time. We didn't think much of it, but I could tell that my friends were slightly weirded out about it. Again, the car approached from the road behind us and then went around the loop, but was driving much slower this time. They kind of stopped midway through the circle for a few seconds before slowly driving away again. But it isn't that unusual for cars to go slow around that circle portion, especially if they are tourists or someone wanting to enjoy the view of the lookout. So we again didn't think much of it and figured that they came back a second time just to enjoy the sights again, although it probably wasn't much of a sight given how dark it was. We again tried to carry on with our conversation, but I think all of us felt a little uneasy now. I almost wasn't surprised when about another 2 to 3 minutes later, we saw headlights approaching from behind us again. We all turned around hoping that it wouldn't be the same car, but of course, it was. We were each pretty scared now, but I think we were all trying to laugh it off, and we were like, they must love it here. This time, they once again slowed way down going around the circle and rolled their windows down to yell at us. We were sat far enough back from the circle and it was a windy night, so we couldn't really make out what it was that they were yelling, but we all agreed that we heard, "Gonna get you" towards the end. We also couldn't see well enough to recognize faces, but could see enough to know that it was a car full of younger men. We were all pretty uneasy and confused at this point, and after they drive off, we frantically are trying to figure out how to handle the situation. We first were trying to brush it off and calm each other down by saying that it was probably some of our mutual friends just trying to scare us. But none of us recognized the car or the voices enough to say that that was for sure the case. We all considered walking back since it was late anyway, but we were all so scared that we would just run into this car again on the main road. My best friend and I tried to laugh it off, agreeing there was simply no way that it would drive by a fourth time, and that we were probably making a big deal out of nothing. But my male friend who was with us kept telling us that he just didn't have a good feeling about it, and said that if the car came by again, he would try to take photos of its license plate and then call the campus police. We eventually agreed with him, figuring the car likely wouldn't come by again. After 5 minutes and no sign of the car, we all relaxed and continued carrying on. But of course, we were wrong. We all sat in silence as the headlights approached for the fourth time, neither of us really wanted to say anything or look behind us to confirm that it was the same dark green car. As the car rounds the circle, our male friend stands up with his phone in hand in an attempt to take a picture of the license plate. This time, instead of completing the circle and going back up the road, the car suddenly pulls into a parking spot off to the side. My friends and I are all panicking, assuming the worst is about to happen. We were all waiting for someone to step out of the car or for the car to leave, when our male friend suddenly gets up and is like, this is fucking ridiculous. I'm going to talk to them. My other friend and I are begging him not to, since we don't know who these people are or what they are capable of. But he brushes us off and starts walking towards them. At this point, I think he was still assuming that it was likely a friend or a fellow student just trying to scare us and not some randos. My friend and I are freaking out as we watch them approach this car, and whoever is driving rolls the window down and sticks their head out. It was definitely not someone we knew. It was a guy, probably a few years older than us, who looked rough. Absolutely not the person that you would want to run into at 3 a.m. in the woods. My friend and I watched this guy and our friends start talking, and to us, it looked like the guy in the car was really angry. We were debating whether or not we should go ahead and call the police, but as soon as my friend managed to dig her phone from her bag, our friend was walking back towards us, and the green car was leaving. We all looked at him like, "What the fuck, man?" And he explained that the car was filled with creepy-looking guys a little older than us. The driver had explained that they were from out of town, a city about an hour away from us, and had gotten bored, so they decided to drive around campus to mess with the students when they came across us. One of the passengers had seen my friend get up to take what he correctly assumed was a photo of their license plate, so they then freaked out and then decided to pull over and tell us that they meant no harm since they didn't want to get in trouble. They apologized to my friend for scaring us and explained that they would leave. My friend was so scared while talking to them that all he could really say was, yeah, maybe don't do that again because we almost called the police." We all calmed down significantly after they left and eventually felt safe enough to leave. From what I remember, I think we ended up getting lucky and were able to find another friend who also happened to be awake late that night, who came to drive us back so we wouldn't have to walk. We all laughed about the situation now since ultimately nothing bad had happened, but it still gives me the creeps. What would have happened if my friend hadn't tried to take a picture of their license plate? Were they planning something else that we prevented? Why was this group of random men who lived over an hour away randomly driving around a rural college campus on a random weeknight? It hit me a few days after this all happened, but I realized that I had seen that car before. Earlier in the day when this all happened, I had spotted the same exact car a few times around campus. It drove past me as I was walking to my morning class, again when I was coming out of the library later in the afternoon, and again at the dining hall in the early evening. I made note of it the first time I saw it since it was such a uniquely colored car and also happens to be one of my favorite colors. As I kept seeing it, I remember thinking, I have a stalker. But I did not take it seriously at that time since it's a smaller campus that has a lot of traffic that time of year. So I figured that it was just a tourist and a coincidence that I kept seeing the car. But now, I really wonder, were they following me the whole day? Had the car been around before this, and I just never noticed it? What do you guys think? My name is Haley, and I work in a downtown office building, and I'm buried in paperwork and numbers as an accountant. Most days, I clock out at a reasonable hour, but today was different. A few unexpected projects landed on my desk, and before I knew it, the city outside my window had turned dark. My phone had buzzed earlier with messages from friends making evening plans since it was a Friday, but work kept me tied to my desk. By the time that I left, the streets were extremely quiet, with only the occasional late worker like me heading home. I usually carpool with a colleague, but she had left early for a family emergency, and I didn't want to bother anyone, so I decided to take the bus home, something that I rarely did after dark. The bus stop was just a block away from the office. It was a small, lonely structure under a flickering streetlight. The route was very straightforward, but the stop itself was not exactly welcoming. It sat at the corner of two quiet streets, bordered by a tall, shadowy building that seemed to loom over you. The only sounds were the wind rustling through the narrow alleyways and the distant hum of traffic from the main road. As I approached the stop, I noticed someone already waiting there. A man. He was standing in the shadows, partially obscured by the dim light. He wore a dark hoodie, and the hood pulled low over his face. He had jeans that had seen better days, and his posture was relaxed, but something about it felt off, like he was too comfortable in this eerie setup. I just gave a polite nod and I kept my distance, standing a few feet away from him. My eyes wandered around hoping to spot the familiar lights of the bus, but the street remained as empty as before. The man seemed to shift closer though, not much, but enough for me to notice. I checked my phone, pretending to be engrossed in something important, though the screen was just lit up with a homepage. A few minutes felt like an eternity, each tick of the clock echoing in the silence, and I could feel his eyes on me. It was just a weight that was impossible to ignore. I glanced in his direction, and he flashed a grin that was more unsettling than friendly. I turned away, trying to focus on the street again, determined not to make eye contact with the sky. And finally, the bus appeared. I got in, and I chose a seat midway down the aisle. But to my dismay, the man followed, sitting directly across from me. The bus was nearly empty, with just a few passengers scattered here and there, and his presence felt too close, too deliberate. During the ride, I kept my gaze fixed out the window, just watching the lights outside. But I could see his reflection in the glass. He tapped his foot a lot and occasionally leaned forward, as if trying to catch my eye. The space between us felt charged with a tension that set my nerves on edge. When we finally reached my stop, I stood up, hoping that he would stay put. But as I stepped off the bus, he followed. He was maintaining a steady pace behind me. The street was familiar to me, of course, but his presence turned it into an unfamiliar territory. I was feeling discomfort and I couldn't shake it off. I took deep breaths, walking with purpose, trying to convince myself that it was just a coincidence. But his footsteps echoed mine, mirroring my every move. I knew better than to head directly home, so I decided to cut through a small plaza, hoping to lose him in the tangle of paths and benches. He hesitated at the edge of the plaza as I took a convoluted path. I was weaving between trees and benches. It was an impromptu detour that thankfully seemed to confuse him. I glanced back once and I saw him standing at the entrance, casting a shadow that seemed to stretch towards me. With the thudding of my heart in my ears, I slipped out the other side, heading to a nearby convenience store. The bright lights and the presence of other people grounded me, pulling me out of the spiral of anxiety that I was feeling. I stayed there for a while, just pretending to browse the aisles until I was sure that he hadn't followed me. And when I was sure, I walked home. When I finally made it home, I was relieved immensely. I locked the door behind me, and that little click sound when you lock the door seemed to be the most comforting thing at that moment. And I just continued with my night. I don't know why I didn't call the police or told anyone. I just decided to myself that I am never going home that late ever again. So I was 19, and I had been with my current fiancé and at that time boyfriend for a year. We both work at the same chemical manufacturing company. I was the night shift lead on my team, and we had hired this guy who I will call Gabe. Gabe was somewhere around late 50s, early 60s, and I had to interact with him as the shift lead and trainer pretty much no matter what. And at night, there was pretty much no one else besides my fiancé's team on the other side of the building and my team present after 2 p.m. So I was pretty much entirely in charge of my team and everything that had to get done. And this is for context and why my ability to avoid him was extremely limited. Anyway, Gabe started talking to me about his type and preferences in women. I didn't see how this was relevant to me and made it clear that I didn't care what his preferences were and accept that everyone had their own. I didn't want to make a big deal out of a seemingly small topic at that time. But he then proceeded to share his ideologies with me, and I remained aloof about the whole subject. It was along the lines of, "It's fine if women work temporarily, but eventually, the goal is to settle down and have children. After all, it works better to have someone working to pay the bills and someone else to manage all the household work." I am quite aware that this is a life people are comfortable with, and I respect it, as I also respect other religions even if I do not follow them. I do not personally agree that the household requires someone to stay home to manage it all the time, nor do I think that if someone does that it has to be the woman. But as far as these conversations went, I didn't see any connection between them and me, and mostly, I just let him prattle whatever he wants to get off his chest, as it wasn't my business. I am not a traditional woman, and figured if anything, I was the opposite of this description anyways. He and I did get into a heated argument once about America's economy and how it's so much better here because everyone can be rich, which I try to explain how it is impossible for everyone to be rich in an economy. Well, the story moves on, and my fiancé was let go for health reasons, and he had to go on unemployment. We only shared one vehicle, and I only had my driver's permit at that time, so I wasn't comfortable driving alone back home at 1 a.m. So I gave my boss a 3 weeks notice just to ensure that I could train everyone up to speed so they weren't screwed over in my absence, which is a notion that my boss very much appreciated. I told the team, and that's when Gabe started behaving in a disagreeable manner. In week 1, I had a hickey on my neck. My boss knew and never made any complaint or fight against it. This wasn't overly common, it's just sometimes happened. But considering that we didn't deal with customers, he certainly didn't care about it. But Gabe did. While I was working, he tapped my shoulder and I assumed that he had some kind of question for me, so I paused to listen, only for him to address my hickey. "Don't you think it's a little unprofessional?" To which I replied that we do not need to put on a show for anyone, and it doesn't hinder my ability to work in any fashion. Well, what if it bothers people or our boss that you're parading your personal life like that? I said that if my boss told me that it was unacceptable, I would take the extra effort to ensure that it didn't happen again. But considering how no one has said anything to me before, I assume that they do not care, so neither will I. So, you don't care if it hurts someone's feelings? No, I do not really, because their feelings about my life are not my concern. Anything they think about it is only their own assumption of what happened anyways, making it their own imagination. Now, I also thought the last response was a weird one anyway. There's no reason my hickey should hurt someone's feelings at work. Questioning my professionalism is a separate issue entirely. But it didn't matter as Gabe walked away. Then while we were all at lunch, Gabe was sitting across from me at the table, and I was talking with the person next in line to be the lead, when I noticed Gabe was holding his phone up at a weird angle. I didn't want to make an accusation when I couldn't be 100% certain, but my instincts told me that he took a picture of me at work. However, this will be later confirmed. On my last week, I had been officially fed up with Gabe, and I had trained the girl after me to everything that I knew as a lead, and I told her that she will be calling all the shots on my last week, and I will simply be here for support if she needs it. I also informed her privately that I will especially not be conducting any verbal interaction with Gabe as I no longer needed to, and I would appreciate it if she took charge on that which she agreed. Unfortunately, Gabe took a stand on this, ultimately forcing a conversation with me in his last week. I just don't think I can take orders from a woman. She can't be my boss. I told him that I had been his boss previously and that the boss above my boss was also a woman. He simply refused to accept it. I then told him that it didn't matter how he felt because I was leaving and she would be in charge, so he could accept that or quit, and it didn't matter to me. I also told him then that I would no longer answer his questions and he would have to go to her. Fate had it out for me though, because on my last day, she had an emergency and needed to leave early, and with us already down another person, it was just me and Gabe that night, much to my displeasure. Again, left with having to direct him around, which he clearly had no issue when it was me. As we were leaving, he stops me on my way out and asks a question that glued all the pieces together. I know your boyfriend is unemployed now, so how would you feel if someone asked if you left your boyfriend for someone who could provide you with a house, a car, and everything that you needed? This made me lose it momentarily for two reasons. One, I love my fiancé very much, and now currently we are going on 6 years together. And second, I have always worked hard for everything I have with my own two hands, and I take major offense to being treated like some desperate damsel in distress who would be with someone over the concept of money. I am not shallow, nor am I materialistic. So I answered pretty honestly, and I told him that I'd be extremely offended because that's not the kind of person I am, and to assume so would indicate such a lack of knowledge about me and insult my character. And then I left, ready to never see him again or talk to him again. It was clear in the end that from the very beginning, he was approaching me with romantic intentions, and gross as it all was, the age gap disgusted me as well. I was 40 years younger than this man. I still had contact with the girl who took my place, and she told me after I had left, he was telling people that me and him were in love, and I was gonna leave my now fiancé for him, and he was showing people the picture he took of me. So glad that that was confirmed. 3 months later, he texted me with a "hey" and a smiley face, because as his boss, I gave my number to employees to let me know if they couldn't come in for work. I told him to never contact me again and that I only spoke to him because I was the lead and I needed to be in contact with others, and there was no reason to speak to each other anymore. Then I changed my number to ensure that he never could again. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared because your fear feeds me.